Hey everybody, it's Warren Haynes here at Guitar World in New York City, and I've been asked to share some riffs that changed my life, and also to share some riffs that I've created or written or whatever the case may be through the years with Government Mule, with the Allman Brothers, with my solo projects, and some other stuff as well. So I think I want to get started with Statesboro Blues. I don't know if you would actually call this a riff, because Duane Allman played it differently every night. But when we were all growing up listening to the Fillmore East album, the introduction to Statesboro Blues was embedded in all of our heads, and we all learned it note for note, or at least to the best of our ability. And so that's definitely something that changed my life. And of course, I never would have imagined that I would wind up being in the Allman Brothers for 25 years, which was a dream come true. But my interpretation of Statesboro Blues is a little different because I play in standard tuning. Duane Allman played in open E, and it's easier to play it in open E, but I learned to play in standard so I could not switch guitars, so I can just grab a slide and play on the same guitar. So you don't have all the harmonics, you don't have all the chordal options, and the fingerings are a little bit different, but this is the way that it's kind of stuck in my head, which is probably about 80% correct. Anyway, interpretation. One of the reasons that I played in standard tuning is so you can kind of just play whatever pops into your head and not have to think in the tuning. You're not confined to the box of the tuning. Of course, people like Derek Trucks, who play in open E all the time, he thinks in open E, but I think in standard. So when I play in open E, I have to think about it that way, whereas when I play in standard, whatever pops into my head, I can kind of play it. There are certain challenges. I'll show you one riff in particular that is so much easier to play in open tuning, but you can simulate it in standard. So this lick here, if you go in open tuning, that lick is really easy. It's just part of the shape. But in standard tuning, you kind of have to dance around with the slide or turn it sideways to accommodate the chordal movements. And this one too, you have to slide up to this major third from here. So you can't go, that's minor. So you have to go. And of course, blues is kind of in between minor and major, so the slippery part of it makes it even better. Also, you'll notice that I'm playing with my fingers. That's for several reasons. One reason is I think it sounds better, but all my slide guitar heroes played with their fingers and also used their right hand as a muting device, part of a muting technique. See, I always have the pick right here, hidden away in case I need it, but I'm playing with my fingers and I'm using whichever fingers I'm not hitting the strings with, I'm using those to dampen the strings that I don't want to hear. And I'm also muting behind the slide with my left hand, so it's kind of double muting, so to speak. Otherwise, you get all of this unwanted noise. In the beginning, slide guitar can be a little bit like playing violin. It can drive your friends and neighbors crazy. So You might have to keep it to yourself in the beginning, but I'll give you an example. If I play most of that was on the B string. I'm using my thumb to mute the bottom strings, and if necessary, using like my second finger to mute the high E string. It seems complicated, but once you get used to it, it's very natural and makes your life a lot better. So you see a lot of thumb muting going on there. Intonation obviously is very important on slide because it's up to you. Where you have the slide positioned determines whether or not you're in tune. And obviously an honest mistake is to think that you place it between the frets like you do with your fingers, but it needs to be more on top of the fret for pitch. The vibrato also helps a lot. A good wide vibrato, and you can kind of shake your way into the pitch, so to speak. And that's also to emulate the human voice. You know, that's to me, that's what I'm looking for with my vibrato, is for it to sound like somebody singing. When I was growing up, I was in a lot of bands that played Allman Brothers songs in clubs, in garage bands, in rehearsal, whatever. All our friends were learning those tunes. And of course, when I joined the band and started playing with those guys, it was a whole nother world. But some of those tunes I had been playing for years by the time that all came about. And one of those songs was In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, that I think we started playing somewhere around when I was around 14 or 15 or something. And a lot of the local bands in that area played that tune, probably poorly in some cases and wrongly in some cases, but those riffs kind of stayed with me all my life, and I think would have regardless of whether I had joined the Allman Brothers or not. That song was such a fun song to jam on. It was one of those songs that any band could stretch out for 10 or 15 minutes, you know. Once it gets to the tempo change, the chorus is... And the harmony part actually is parallel most of the time, but not all of the time. There are times when it breaks away from parallel harmony, which is very cool. You put those two together and it's quite beautiful. I really love the way it goes from the slow part to the fast part, changes tempos, coming out of that diminished chord. They use that as a tempo change. It displays Dickie Betts's writing technique, but also their influence of people like Django Reinhardt. That was a really big influence on Dickie. Brings out the jazz side of those guys. And you know, playing that minor 9, the rhythm part in the front, is just beautiful and really fun. to play across. So when we play it, even these days, sometimes it'll go on for 15 or 20 minutes. So the song Kind of Bird, which was nominated for a Grammy, Best Rock Instrumental Performance, Dickie Betts and I wrote that together. And we were listening to a lot of Charlie Parker at the time. And Dickie wanted to write something with Charlie Parker influence. And I had been working on this instrumental melody, but it was to a straight beat. It wasn't to a swing beat yet. And it went. And I had showed him that, and we had kind of tweaked it a little bit. And after a few days of writing, Dickie came to me and said, "There's something missing in that tune." We hadn't finished it yet, obviously. But he said, "There's something about it that's bugging me." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was lying in bed last night, I was hearing it as a swing." And he's like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And I was like, 1, 2, 3. And he's like, "Oh, I love that." And then he came up with. So every day we would go to his place and work on Kind of Bird for a few hours. And then we would go to rehearsal and literally teach the band however much we had written and rehearse that much of it. And then the next day we would write more. And then we would go to rehearsal that night and teach the band what we wrote that day. It took a really long time to put it all together, and there's a lot of moving parts, but well worth it. We're also going to talk a little bit about riffs that I've written through the years for different projects that I was involved with that I want to share. Since we're talking about the Allman Brothers, the song End of the Line has an interesting story. We were at a hotel somewhere on tour, and I walked down the hall to Alan Woody's room to borrow some toothpaste or something civilian like that. And I walked in the room, and I had my acoustic guitar with me, and I was playing this riff. And I was just playing the first half of that. And Greg Allman was in Woody's room, and little did I know they were working on a song together. And Greg goes, "That's it. That's what we need right there." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "We're looking for some music for this tune we're working on. That's it. That's what we need." So we sat down and started writing Into the Line based on happenstance. So the chorus goes. Again, I'm always cradling the pick like this, and so I'm playing the main riff with the pick. And then when it gets down here, going back and forth, And I'm also playing slide in that tune, so I'm playing with my fingers for that, all the finger picking stuff. But then when you want the more aggression on that main riff, play it with the pick, This is Warren Haynes signing off, and I want to say thank you to Guitar World for having me and asking me about some of my favorite riffs that I've written or that I've learned from someone else or that have influenced me. I'll also remind you about my new record, Million Voices Whisper, that came out a few months ago. Check it out. I think you'll dig it.